Hey everyone, good morning. Lisa Martin here with In Cloud We Trust. Today we're talking about why NAS, why now? The dynamic duo is back. You are in luck. This is going to be a very fun-spirited 20-minute conversation. Please welcome Stephen Manley, Druva's Chief Technology Officer, and W. Curtis Preston, its Chief Technical Evangelist. We're going to be talking about why it's time to end a quarter century of NAS frustration. Second topic is why now? What is the urgency that you need to understand? And then the third thing that we're going to leave you with, as we always do, is recommendations and best practices. Stephen, let's kick things off with you. Let's talk about why it is time to end a quarter century of NAS backup frustration. What's going on?
Man, everything's going on in NAS, and for years, people have always said, I don't know how to back up my NAS systems. And every time we look for these silver bullets to solve the problem. Once upon a time, the silver bullet was NDMP, and half the audience just hung their heads in shame, and the other half, what's NDMP, and they're Googling it. Then we said, well, it's snapshots and replicas. That's the answer. And you ran into issues of, but it doesn't solve all the regulations, and it's not great for long-term retention, and it's not really a full backup, especially when you start thinking about ransomware. And so we keep looking for these solutions. Well, maybe deduplication and disk-based backup, that'll be the answer, but it didn't scale. And so you've got all these challenges you face. And meanwhile, on the NAS side, we just kept putting more data in there. NAS systems are great. I could run databases in NAS. I could stick database dumps in NAS. I could run technical applications. I could put my log files. I can put media and entertainment. I could do anything with NAS. It's amazing until I have to back it up.
Yeah, I would just say, Stephen just took all my points. I don't know what I'm supposed to talk about now.
Dig into the complexity, Curtis.
Yeah, so, while Stephen was over, I'm blaming Stephen for NAS because he did work at one of the largest NAS companies, and he had a hand in NDMP, which at a time I was one of the ones that was excited that it was finally, there was an official way, right? Because for a long time we had unofficial ways of backing up filers, and then we were very excited that NDMP came along, that it was an official way, and then it created other problems, right? And created really, a dependency on tape that at a time, right at a time when some people were starting to move away from it, right? Because NDMP was really designed for tape, and this idea that, and we just kept putting more data. NAS falls into the unstructured data world, although not everything on NAS is unstructured data, right? There are plenty of people that put their Oracle databases or SQL Server databases, or they're running their VMware on top of NAS, right? But I think I can say that the vast majority of data sitting on filers out there is unstructured data. And when I think about unstructured data, the thing about it is that it's just kind of chaos by design, right? It's all of these folders and folders and folders of many, many, many files. And sometimes millions of files all in one little space, right? A lot of really small files. Those can be really problematic. And what I think about is that it's a bunch of data, most of which will never be looked at. And yet we still have to back it up, right? That it has to be protected, because in the middle of the 8 billion files that no one's going to look at, there's like 5 files that someone cares about. And so the way we've always done that is we've always protected it by basically treating all of that the same, backing it all up, and just created all sorts of design problems throughout the years.
And when we're talking about that, and also long-term retention, Stephen, what are some of the challenges that organizations are going through? There's billions of files, there's dozens of regulations, long-term retention.
Yeah, long-term retention is brutal, right? And in general, what I've found is long-term retention for NAS, it tends to have a much longer term than anything else. Databases, well, I generally know what's in any given database, and most people 6 months, 12 months, sometimes a couple of years. And we can have a whole separate LinkedIn Live about where Curtis and I both agree really any long-term retention on a database backup is insane. But ignoring that, right? VMs also, you tend to get a much more reasonable retention period. NAS is the one where people go 7 years, 30 years, 100 years. I
Forever.
kid you not. Right. I have met customers that have told me things like, well, we need to hold our backups for 30 plus years. And you ask them, why is this? Well, there's a government regulation that was created back when everything was paper, and it's never been changed. And the kind of things we had on paper are now the kind of things we put into our NAS system. And so it's not just the retention of it and the cost, but then it is the expectation that someday you may need to be able to find that. I had a customer relatively recently that needed to find rocket designs from 20, 25 years ago to help with some project they were working on. And phenomenally, they were able to actually retrieve that. Now, they had taken those backups and migrated the backups time after time after time, and this one ended up in the cloud, and they were able to search through that. But it is phenomenal that like Curtis said, you're going to need those 5 files back, and you don't know which 5 they are, but when you need them back, you need them back. And so that long-term retention, it's stressful, it's scary. It may often make you think, I don't really need to do this, do I? Could I just pipe it all to dev null? And then comes that moment when you save the world from, presumably a meteorite coming at us or some Armageddon type of movie scenario.
Hey, that's important. I want to know. I want somebody to be able to find that file. If there's a meteorite coming this way, I need to know about this. Curtis, another thing that's challenging, and we've been talking about it on this program since we started this a year and a half ago, ransomware, unstructured data, big challenge there.
Right. Ransomware does tend to target unstructured data for a bunch of reasons. One is that if you do encrypt any part of a database, everything sort of generally comes to a halt immediately, and you'll be discovered. But ransomware with unstructured data, you can actually, and there have been documented cases of this where the attackers start with the oldest files first, and they're going after those. I think it was 5. I don't know what number I said earlier, but they go after the 5 billion files that no one's looking at first. They go backwards in time, and so they're able to encrypt a significant portion of your organization before anyone notices, right? And then also there's a like a psychological impact of finding out that 80% of your environment has been encrypted. No one thinks about the fact that it's the 80% that nobody's looking at, right? There is a psychological effect of the fact that this has happened. So this it's part of the idea of the way ransomware works that that attracts it to unstructured data for sure.
Got it. All right, let's talk about the why now, the title of our show today. Stephen, let's start with you. You talked about the cost and the complexity, the challenges with long-term retention, regulations. What is it from your seat, from your lens, that makes this an urgent issue to deal with now?
Well, so I think the urgency's always been there, right? And that's why we've always looked for these silver bullets, whether it was snapshots or it was deduplicated storage systems. Or I think the difference is this time we have a shot, right? Especially at the biggest problem. So as we deal with a lot of customers, what we see is they put in place sort of a multi-tiered protection solution. I do use snapshots, and that's great. Snapshots are fabulous for short-term recoveries. And I do use replicas because those are wonderful if you have some sort of system outage. But they've really struggled with that, especially that long-term retention piece, that offsite copy piece, that ransomware protection piece, because there hasn't been something that's quite covered that. But cloud, the ability to have a cloud and obviously in our case, a SaaS style data protection solution really lets you cover that segment of the market in a way that we haven't been able to do since 20 plus years ago when tape was still a viable solution for a lot of these environments. And so the why now is because you have a chance of succeeding. Where for the last 10 years, it felt like you were just going to run into a brick wall and not be able to solve it. You have a chance at actually solving this problem right now.
Curtis, what are your thoughts on the urgency?
I'm stuck. I'm stuck in my head. I have a parody of my my shot going on in my head. The song from Hamilton. I'm not throwing away my shot. I literally haven't been able to get that out of my head since Stephen talking about our shot. Yeah, the problem has gotten bigger and bigger and worse, right? And the problem has also exploded due to cloud as well, right? Because we have files and filers and things that behave like filers all over the planet. Mm-hmm. So as that problem continues to grow, and also just the advent of cheaper and cheaper computing and storage, you know, we've always talked about things like HSM or things like that to help solve the problem of this growing problem of NAS and unstructured data. And no one ever does it, right? Because they just keep throwing more and more storage. And we're getting to a point where, you know, this idea that it's not that uncommon to have a petabyte sized, you know, unstructured data environment, right? And so it just, at some point, your backup system just breaks. And certainly your long-term retention system is one that is, you know, it's just one that the bill just gets astronomical at some point.
So Stephen, if the urgency, and sorry, you were about to say something, but if the urgency is there and cloud is there and the opportunity is there, how does that help customers from a TCO perspective, from an LTR perspective?
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going to go. I think Curtis hit on the fundamental technological shift that makes any of this possible, which is, you know, for years and years, we looked and we said, you know, my NAS system is made up of very often the lowest cost disk drives and some of the lowest cost processors I could get, because I knew I was storing a lot of, you know, frankly, infrequently accessed data. Maybe I'd have a little bit of cache of SSD, or I'd use the lowest cost SSD, and we could get into all the storage wars. But there was never enough price delta to say, oh, but now I can do something significantly less expensive for that long-term retention. And then, you know, arose S3 and AWS S3 Glacier and Amazon S3 Glacier Deep Archive. And partially because Amazon is able to strap together so much low-cost disk and so much low-cost compute, and then be able to share that across such a large customer base, you can see this massive delta. And then when you throw on top of it the ability, you know, to say deduplicate on top of what they're doing, you now have that price delta between your production NAS storage, which again is already incredibly cost efficient, right? The NAS vendors are wildly cost efficient at what they do, but the ability to have something even, you know, like significantly orders of magnitude less expensive is huge. And I'll let Curtis take the next part, but I think the management of it is the second part, because when you get into petabytes, that's not something the average human being can just sort of do by hand. And so I'll let him take the management part, because I know he loves talking about management.
I've been told I'm anti-management, but that's a different I think that's a different issue.
More than once.
I have authority issues. But when I think about it, when I think about long-term retention, the one thing I want to focus on is the ability to search that data, right? Because going back to that, you know, my analogy of piles of stuff around my house, if I needed to keep those piles, and then now I'm going to keep all of the piles I've ever had in my house. This analogy is breaking down very quickly, but the idea of being able to find anything is you know, not possible under most long-term retention systems, right? So it is the more you're going to keep, the more data you're going to keep, and the longer you're going to keep it, the more you need some sort of you know, integrated system to store that data, and to be able, really importantly, to be able to search that data. Because if you can't search it, you know, if you can't search the files from 7 years ago to find those, you know, satellite drawings from, by the way, when you said 2025, I thought you said to get satellite drawings from 2025. I was very
20 to 25 years ago.
Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah. So I thought we were in Back to the Future there for a minute. But yeah, to get satellite drawings from, you know, 25 years ago, you if you can't search, you're not going to be able to find that really important, that one file from 5-10 years ago that somebody deleted. You're not going to be able to find it. And if you can't find it, there's really no point in storing it. In fact, there's, I just want to touch on for 1 second. There is this concept, the legal term is escaping me at the moment, but there is this concept, adverse inference. If you store your stuff for a really long time, but then can't find the things when you're looking for them, and you get sued, right? And, we're here in America, we love to sue each other, right? If you have the data in long-term retention, but you can't retrieve it because your retention system is so poor, you can actually get what's called an adverse inference instruction, which basically the judge tells the jury, whatever the plaintiff is saying the defendant did, just assume they did it, because nobody could be this bad at their backups. That's a thing, and it has happened in the loss of multi-billion-dollar lawsuits.
So Curtis, sticking with you, let's go to our third and final topic, recommendations and best practices. That is not a scenario that anybody wants to be in. You're right. We live in a very litigious society. When you're talking with customers of Druva's, how do you advise them the next steps to get this moving, since the urgency is here, the time is now, and the technology is here?
Well, I do think, Stephen mentioned snapshots and replication. I'm a fan of snapshots and replication as the primary protection mechanism for filers, right? They really, it's hard to improve on that base technology. But then to get that just in case copy, I'm a fan of incremental forever and source ID duplication. These are technologies that a lot of companies have. Druva has it as well, so that we can then get the data to another place, store it in an air-gapped way to keep it away from ransomware, because snapshots and replication can still be infected by ransomware. Keep it in another, physical, geographically physical location that is protected from a ransomware attack, but then also be able to provide long-term, search capability against it.
Stephen, your thoughts?
I'd probably throw a couple other in. One is, now that you've built that, I think it's really important to say, well, if I've got snapshots and replication, what is the remainder of the problem I'm trying to solve? Because I see a lot of people saying, well, okay, I'm going to treat my NAS backups like I treat everything else, and so I want to have a local copy on different kind of disk, and then maybe I'll figure out how to push it to cloud and do all those steps. And you look and you say, well, all right, any short-term, instant oops recovery, you're handling from your snapshot. You don't need that on a local disk drive. Any system failure, you're handling from your replica. So think really intentionally about what is it that what use case you're trying to solve. And like Curtis said, it's probably the long-term retention searchable, sort of searchable environment. So you want to then immediately go kind of to the coldest storage you're going to be able to get in a lot of those cases. So don't overinvest and say, well, I'm just going to treat this backup like I treat the backup of my VMs. It's a different world. And again, because snapshots and replicas change that world. So that would be the first recommendation I'd make. I think the second recommendation I'd make is, analyze that data, whether it's after the first backup or before. The more you can understand what you're looking at, because NAS isn't just home directories, like we were saying. It's technical applications, it's log data, it's all sorts of different kinds of things. The more you can break that down and assign different retention periods to that, the better off you're going to be. And if, as a backup administrator, you say, I don't have access to that data, well, great. Do the first backup. Let someone who can sort of run analysis on that data feed that back to you, so you can make smart decisions from then on.
Got it. Excellent, guys. Thanks for walking us through how customers in any industry can end this quarter century of NAS frustration. Why the compelling event is now, as Stephen had said earlier, the urgency has always been there. The technology is there now, and of course, we appreciate your recommendations. Curtis, do you want to take us out with singing that song from Hamilton?
Not throwing away my shot. I need all my data, my files really do matter, and I'm not throwing away my shot.
Wow. That was phenomenal. That blew my mind. I'm going to watch this again just for that part. We want to thank you for participating in our show today. I told you it was going to be fun and interactive with Stephen and Curtis, and boy, did they deliver. For W. Curtis Preston and Stephen Manley, I'm Lisa Martin. We'll see you next time, maybe with a new Broadway song as well. Thanks for watching.